I want to tell you about a patient I'll never forget. She was 91 years old. She walked into my office, walked, no cane, no walker, and she sat down and told me she was worried. Not about her heart, not about her memory. She was worried because her neighbor, who was 74, had just moved into assisted living because he could no longer get up off the couch without help. And she asked me a question that I think about to this day. She said, "Doctor, why are my legs still working when his stopped?" Now, here's what most people believe. They believe that losing strength in your legs is simply what happens, that it's the price of admission for a long life. Your muscles shrink, your balance goes, and one day the stairs win. That is not what the science says. What the science says is that after the age of 50, you lose roughly 1 to 2% of your muscle mass every single year. But that loss is not a clock. It's a conversation. It's a conversation happening every day between your muscles, your blood vessels, and your stem cells. Your body is constantly deciding whether to build leg muscle or break it down. And the loudest voice in that conversation, louder than your age, louder than your genetics, is what you put on your plate, because the blood vessels that feed your thigh muscles can be grown. The stem cells that repair those muscles can be activated, and there is one food, an ordinary food, probably sitting in a grocery store 2 miles from where you are right now, that does both. Let me tell you what it is. I want you to picture something that happened in a nursing home in Boston. The researchers went looking for the frailest people they could find, not the active seniors, not the ones out walking every morning. They recruited 10 residents, and the youngest of them was 86. The oldest was 96. Several of them had multiple chronic diseases. Some of them could not stand up from a chair without pushing off with their arms. And for 8 weeks, these men and women lifted weights. At the end of those 8 weeks, their leg strength had increased by an average of 174%. The muscle in their thighs had physically grown. Some of them put down the canes they had walked in with. 8 weeks at 90 years old. Now, I want you to sit with what that means, because it overturns something almost everybody in this room has quietly accepted as true. We have been taught that muscle loss is a sentence, that somewhere around 60 or 70, a door closes, and everything after that is managed decline. You get a little weaker each year, you get a little slower on the stairs, and eventually somebody hands you a walker and you say thank you. We treat it like weather, like something that happens to you. But that is not what your muscle is doing. Your muscle is not falling apart. Your muscle is listening. Here is what is actually going on inside your legs right now. Every single day, your body is running a ledger. On one side, there is muscle protein synthesis, the building. On the other side, there is muscle protein breakdown, the demolition. These two processes are running constantly in everyone at every age. In a 25-year-old, the ledger balances. In a 50-year-old who eats poorly and sits for 11 hours a day, the ledger tips, not dramatically, just slightly, 1%, 2%. And that is the deception of sarcopenia. It never announces itself. It arrives as a rounding error. You do not wake up weak. You wake up 1% weaker, and you cannot feel 1%. So you feel nothing at all for 20 years, and then one afternoon you reach for the handrail, and you realize you have needed it for some time. But notice what that mechanism tells us. If your muscle is being rebuilt every day, then it is being negotiated every day. And anything that is negotiated every day can be renegotiated. This is why I call it a conversation and not a clock. A clock only goes one direction. A conversation has 2 voices, and you control one of them. So who is talking? Your muscles are talking to your nervous system, because the nerves that connect to your fast twitch fibers, the ones that let you catch yourself when you stumble, begin to retract with age, and those fibers go silent, waiting for a signal. Your muscles are talking to your blood vessels, because muscle is one of the most vascular tissues in your body, And when the capillary network feeding your thigh thins out, that tissue is being slowly starved of oxygen and nutrients, and it responds the only way it can, by shrinking to fit its supply. Your muscles are talking to your immune system because chronic low-grade inflammation, the kind that rises silently in most people after middle age, actively signals for muscle to be broken down. Inflammation is a demolition order. And most remarkably, your muscles are talking to a population of dormant repair cells called satellite cells. These are stem cells. They live tucked along the outside of every muscle fiber, and their entire job is to wake up, divide, and fuse into damaged muscle to repair and enlarge it. And here is the part that changes everything, because for years, the assumption was that older people had simply run out of these cells. That the well was dry. The well is not dry. Studies looking at muscle biopsies from people in their 70s and 80s find satellite cells still present. Fewer, yes, particularly around the fast twitch fibers, but present. They have not disappeared. They have gone quiet. They are sitting in a neighborhood that stopped sending them signals, waiting for a message that never arrives. So the question is not, how do I stop getting old? That is the wrong question, and it has never had a good answer. The question is, what is the message? What actually reaches down into that tissue and tells the blood vessels to grow, tells the inflammation to quiet down, and tells those sleeping stem cells that there is work to do again? Some of that message is movement. Everybody knows that part. Nobody is surprised by that part. But movement is the demand. Something has to supply it. You can send the signal to build all day long, and if the raw material and the blood flow are not there, the construction crew shows up to an empty lot. That supply arrives 3 times a day on a plate. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Frank. Frank was 78, and he came to see me because of a symptom he had spent 2 years explaining away. He could walk about 1 block, then his calves would begin to burn, a deep, tightening ache, and he would have to stop. He would stand there pretending to look in a shop window, and after a minute or two, the pain would drain away and he could walk another block. Frank had decided this was old age. His wife had decided it was old age. 2 doctors had told him to take it easy. Frank did not have an old age problem. Frank had a plumbing problem. The arteries feeding his legs were narrowed by plaque, and when his muscles asked for more oxygen, the delivery system could not answer. The medical term is claudication, and it comes from the Latin claudicare, to limp. And here is the part I need you to hear. Frank's leg muscles were shrinking, not because they were old, because they were being starved. Now, when we talk about losing strength as we age, almost everyone pictures the same thing. They picture muscle wasting away, getting thinner, getting softer, and that is real, but it is only half the story. And honestly, it is the less interesting half, because muscle is not a lump of meat. Muscle is one of the most richly blooded tissues in the entire human body. Every single fiber in your thigh is wrapped in a mesh of capillaries, vessels so fine that red blood cells have to pass through them in single file, folding themselves to fit. That is where the exchange happens. Oxygen out of the blood into the fiber, carbon dioxide out of the fiber back into the blood. Amino acids delivered, glucose delivered, insulin delivered, hormones delivered, waste hauled away, strip that mesh away, and the muscle fiber is a factory with no loading dock. It does not matter how big the factory is if nothing can get in or out. And that mesh thins with age. Researchers who examine muscle tissue from older adults consistently find fewer capillaries surrounding each muscle fiber than in the young. The loss is not even either sick. It hits hardest around the fast twitch fibers, which are precisely the fibers you need to catch yourself when your foot slips on a wet floor. The fibers that fire in a fraction of a second to stop a fall. So the fibers that keep you upright are the ones losing their blood supply first. Now think back to that ledger I described, building on one side, breakdown on the other. We know that when you eat protein, The amino acids have to actually reach the muscle to trigger the building. And in older adults, something remarkable and troubling happens. In a young person, a meal causes the tiny vessels in the muscle to open up, to recruit, to widen the delivery network so those nutrients can flood in. In many older adults, that response is blunted. The meal arrives, the signal is sent, and the vessels barely answer. This is part of why researchers describe older muscle as being resistant to building. And it is not just a muscle problem. It is a delivery problem. You can eat all the protein in the world, and if the road is closed, the protein does not arrive where it is needed. It simply passes through. And the endothelium, that single layer of cells lining every one of your blood vessels, is the traffic controller for all of it. Healthy endothelium produces nitric oxide, which tells the vessel wall to relax and open. Damaged endothelium, inflamed endothelium under attack from high blood sugar and high blood pressure for 40 years, produces less of it. The vessels stay tight. The blood moves less freely, and the muscle downstream quietly recalibrates itself to survive on less. Muscle is efficient. Muscle is ruthless. It will not maintain tissue it cannot feed, so it shrinks to fit its supply. This is why two people can lift the same weights and eat the same protein and get completely different results. It is not willpower. It is not even genetics, most of the time. One of them has an open, dense, responsive vascular network delivering everything to the tissue, and the other is trying to build a house through a straw. And it is why I get frustrated when someone tells an 80-year-old to just do more squats. Exercise is essential. I will never argue otherwise, but exercise is a request. It raises the demand. Whether that demand gets met depends entirely on whether blood can get there. So the real question, the one almost nobody asks, is not, how do I build muscle? It is, how do I build the supply lines that make muscle possible? And your body can build them. Your body grows new blood vessels throughout your entire life. That process is called angiogenesis, and it does not switch off at 65. It responds to signals. And some of the most powerful signals you will ever send your vascular system do not come from a pharmacy. So let me answer the question I left you with. What food does both? It grows in the dirt. It stains your fingers. It costs about $1. And for most of my career, nobody in medicine paid the slightest attention to it. It's the beet. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because I thought it too. Beets? The thing your grandmother served out of a can? Stay with me, because when scientists finally looked closely at what a beet does inside the human body, what they found was so unexpected that it changed how we study blood flow. Beets are one of the richest natural sources of a compound called dietary nitrate. And nitrate, on its own, does nothing. It's inert. It's a passenger. But here is where it gets extraordinary, and this is one of my favorite stories in all of nutrition science, because it involves a part of your body you have never thanked for anything. When you eat a beet, the nitrate is absorbed into your bloodstream, and then something strange happens. Your salivary glands actively pull that nitrate back out of the blood and concentrate it in your saliva. Your body goes out of its way to deliver it to your mouth. And waiting there, living in the grooves on the back of your tongue, is a specific community of bacteria whose job is to convert that nitrate into nitrite. You swallow it, the nitrite travels down, and in your bloodstream, particularly where oxygen is low, which is to say precisely where tissue is struggling, it is converted into nitric oxide. Nitric oxide. The molecule that won the Nobel Prize in 1998. The molecule that tells the smooth muscle in your blood vessel walls to relax and open. Think about the elegance of that system. Your body has built a partnership with bacteria in your mouth in order to manufacture the exact molecule that opens your arteries. And it did this long before anyone knew what an artery was. Now remember Frank. Remember what we said about the aging endothelium, that it produces less nitric oxide on its own, that the vessels stay tight, that the muscle downstream shrinks to fit a shrinking supply. This pathway does not run through the endothelium, it's a second road, a backup route, and it works best under exactly the conditions where the primary route fails. That is mechanism number one. The beet opens the delivery network, and the research bears it out. When investigators gave beetroot juice to older adults and to patients with heart failure, people whose muscles were being starved in exactly the way I described, they saw measurable increases in muscle power, not over months, within hours of a single dose. Studies in animal models found something even more specific. The increase in blood flow was directed preferentially toward the fast-twitch fibers, the very fibers that lose their capillaries first, the very fibers that catch you when you slip. Now here is the second mechanism, and this is the one that made me sit up. Remember those satellite cells, the dormant stem cells lying along your muscle fibers, waiting for a message that stopped arriving? We now know a great deal about what wakes them up. When a muscle fiber is stretched or stressed, it releases a signal that pulls those satellite cells out of dormancy and tells them to divide and repair. And the trigger for that release, the switch that starts the whole cascade, is nitric oxide, the same molecule. The exact same molecule that opens your blood vessels is also a required signal for activating the stem cells that rebuild your muscle. I want to be careful and honest with you here because the satellite cell work is largely laboratory science, cell cultures, animal studies, not yet proven in a 90-year-old holding a glass of beet juice. I will not oversell it. But the biology is pointing in one direction, and it is remarkable that one molecule sits at both doors. And there is a third thing, almost a bonus. The deep crimson color of a beet comes from pigments called betalains, and betalains are anti-inflammatory antioxidants. Remember that chronic low-grade inflammation acts as a standing demolition order on your muscle? Betalains help quiet that noise, so you have one ordinary root vegetable that opens the supply lines, signals the repair crew, and turns down the demolition order. 2 servings a day is where the research clusters, roughly a cup of cooked beets or a small glass of beet juice, which is more concentrated. Roast them, don't boil them to death. Drink the juice. And here is the one warning that matters more than people realize. Do not use antibacterial mouthwash. Studies have shown it wipes out the bacteria on your tongue and shuts the entire pathway down. You will eat the beet and get nothing. Vivi, there's a number I want to give you, and it's going to sound absurdly small. 10 days. That's how long it takes a healthy older adult, put on bed rest in a research setting, to lose about 1 kilogram of lean leg mass. 10 days. Not a year of neglect, not a decade of bad habits, a hospital stay for pneumonia, a hip that needed a repair, a bad flu where you mostly stayed on the couch. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. When those same researchers followed people afterward, the loss did not simply reverse when they got up and went home. Younger people bounce back. Older adults frequently do not fully, not without deliberate work. So the 10 days cost more than 10 days. Sometimes they cost the rest of the way. This is the thing about muscle that almost nobody understands. Muscle is not a savings account. You do not put it in at 40 and withdraw it at 80. Muscle behaves like a lease. You pay it or you lose the property. And the invoice arrives every single day, whether you feel like paying it or not. Now, remember what I told you at the beginning, that ledger running inside your legs right now. Synthesis on one side, breakdown on the other. Here's what I did not tell you. That ledger does not close once a year. It closes at every meal. When you eat enough protein at a sitting, muscle protein synthesis rises. It stays elevated for roughly a few hours. Then it comes back down, and your body returns to a state of net breakdown until the next meal. That is the rhythm. Up, down. Deposit, withdrawal, deposit, withdrawal. 3 or 4 times a day, every day, for the rest of your life. which means the question is never, am I building muscle? The question is, over the last 30 meals, did I end up ahead or behind? And here is where the arithmetic becomes ruthless, because it's the same arithmetic that makes compound interest so extraordinary and credit card debt so devastating. Small numbers, repeated, become enormous numbers. 1% a year sounds like nothing. It sounds like a rounding error, and I said as much earlier. But run it forward. 1% a year from age 50 to age 80 is not 30%. It compounds, and you arrive somewhere in the neighborhood of a quarter of your muscle gone, and you never once felt it happen. Not on any given morning, not in any given month. The loss lives entirely below the threshold of perception, which is precisely what makes it dangerous. Nothing that hurts gets ignored for 30 years. Only the painless things do. Now flip it, because the same mathematics runs in the other direction, and this is the part that ought to give you hope. Those men and women in Boston I described, the ones in their 80s and 90s who increased leg strength by 174%, did that in 8 weeks, not 8 years. 8 weeks of consistent, repeated deposits. The body is not stubborn. The body is responsive. It has simply been waiting for someone to send it a signal worth answering. And this is why I keep coming back to food, rather than telling you to find a gym. Because you will not lift weights 365 days a year. Nobody does. Life gets in the way. Your knee acts up, the weather turns, you travel, you get sick, you get busy, you get discouraged. Exercise is essential, and I want you to do it. But exercise is episodic for almost every human being on Earth. Eating is not episodic. You will eat today, you will eat tomorrow. You will eat on the days you feel strong and on the days you feel terrible, on your birthday and in the hospital, and on the worst week of your life. Food is the one intervention with a guaranteed 100% adherence rate because you are going to do it anyway. So the only real question is what you're depositing when you do it. A cup of roasted beets on your plate tonight is not going to make you stronger tomorrow. Let me be completely honest about that because I have no interest in selling you a miracle. Tomorrow, you will feel exactly the same. Next week, you will feel exactly the same. But that beet opened the vessels feeding your thigh a little wider than they were. It delivered the amino acids that were otherwise going to pass right through you. It sent a whisper to the repair cells sleeping along your fibers. It quieted the inflammation writing demolition orders on tissue you cannot afford to lose. And then you do it again the next day. And the day after. And the arithmetic starts working for you instead of against you, silently, below the threshold of perception, in exactly the way it has been working against you for years. So let me go back to that 91-year-old woman standing in my office asking me why her legs still worked when her neighbors had stopped. I gave her the honest answer. I told her it was not luck. It was not good genes. It was not that she had somehow been spared the thing that comes for everyone. It was that, for 40 years, without ever once thinking of it as medicine, she had been sending her body a message 3 times a day. Her blood vessels stayed open. Her repair cells stayed reachable. Her muscles stayed fed. And when her body ran the ledger every evening, she was ahead. Her neighbor was not a weaker man. He was an unfed one. Here is what I want you to take home tonight, and it's only 3 things. Muscle loss is not a sentence. It is a conversation, and you control one of the voices. Strength is not stored in the muscle alone. It's carried there through vessels you can widen and a supply line you can rebuild at 70, at 80, at 90. And the deposit is small. It is a cup of beets. It is $1. It is a decision you make while standing at the counter, half paying attention on an ordinary Tuesday. You will not feel it tomorrow. That is exactly why most people never do it. But the arithmetic does not care whether you feel it. It only cares whether you showed up. So show up tonight, and then again tomorrow. Your legs are listening.